It begins in silence, though not the silence of peace. It is the silence of a city that never sleeps, a silence that thrums with industry and faith, a silence smothered beneath billions of voices, each crying out for survival on the surface of Terra. Amidst that endless tide of humanity, children are chosen. No one knows why one face is lifted from the crowd and another is not. There are no omens, no explanations, no promises. A hand simply descends, and a child is taken, swallowed into the labyrinthine depths of the imperial palace, never to be seen again by the world that bore him. To be chosen is no blessing. It is a death, and more than a death. The child does not vanish into memory but into unmaking. His name is taken first. Names are chains to the past, threads binding one to family, to history, to the comforts of belonging. Under the harsh light of the palace's vaults, names are struck away, burned from record, erased even from the child's own memory through whispered catechisms and the grinding labor of endless drills. They are given no new name in return, only silence. From the moment of their taking, they are no longer themselves. They are clay, waiting to be shaped. The shaping is long, cruel, and absolute. Bones are broken and remade. Flesh is torn and rebuilt. Augmetics are fused with muscle, genetic refinement carved into marrow. Day by day, they are stripped of weakness, reforged with the Emperor's design. They do not merely train as soldiers. They are sculpted as living weapons, each one a singular masterpiece wrought by pain and patience. Where the Space Marines are mass-forged, the Custodians are crafted, each unique, each the labor of years, decades, even centuries of refinement. The halls where this takes place are not spoken of. Even within the palace, few dare to tread near them. They are cathedrals of pain and silence, where the air tastes of oil and burning incense, where the cries of children echo briefly before being drowned beneath discipline. Servitors shuffle through the darkness, their hollow eyes blind to the agony unfolding, while gene writes whisper over data slates, adjusting sequences with the care of priests sculpting divine idols. The child's body is a canvas, and every scar a brushstroke in the Emperor's endless design. And yet the physical torment is only the beginning. To strip away weakness is not only to strengthen flesh but to annihilate the soul. Memory itself is carved away, reduced to fragments, then buried beneath layers of doctrine. The initiate is taught not only to obey but to forget why obedience was once difficult. They learn silence as language, obedience as instinct, faith as marrow. They are broken not into despair but into stillness, until even the concept of rebellion seems as foreign as laughter. The first oath comes when this process has devoured all else. It is spoken not in words but in silence, a vow sealed in the marrow of the Custodian's reborn flesh. To serve not as man, but as reflection. To guard not merely a throne, but the Emperor's dream of humanity itself. They kneel in armor for the first time, oromite gleaming like captured dawn, their faces expressionless beneath the weight of eternity. The oath is not heard by any mortal ear, for it is not meant for mortals. It is heard only by the throne, and by the Emperor upon it. For those who survive this crucible, and not all do, there is no return. The child they were is dead, their ashes scattered into silence. What rises in their place is a Custodian, though not yet blooded, not yet shadowed, not yet dissolved. They are the Emperor's companion, and in that companionship, there is no end. And so begins the path. The oath has been spoken. The watch awaits. The hours stretch into days, the days into years, yet time has little meaning within the first oath. The custodial aspirants learn not to mark it with sunlight or seasons, for the palace's vaults are eternal and unchanging. Instead, they measure time in repetition, in ritual, in the slow, grinding mastery of themselves and the tools they will one day wield as extensions of the Emperor's will. Each movement is observed, each breath catalogued. A misstep, a hesitation, an untrained thought, all are punished not with anger but with erasure, subtle and absolute. To endure is not sufficient, to endure with perfection is the only standard. The first lesson is control, control over muscle, over mind, over the instinctive tremors that mark mortals. The aspirants are placed in chambers filled with mirrored walls, each reflection a reminder of what they once were. They are ordered to strike at targets invisible to ordinary perception, to move in patterns dictated not by desire but by logic embedded in their instruction. Every failure is met with repetition until instinct itself becomes weaponized, until movement is as inevitable as the flow of time. Even sleep becomes a trial. The body rests, but the mind remains vigilant, trained to sense intrusions, to hear the faintest shift in the air. Every sound becomes a signal, every shadow a potential threat, and the aspirants learn to move with anticipation rather than reaction. The lessons deepen. They are taught languages long lost to the Imperium, scripts etched into memory as if their very neurons are data slates. These tongues are not for communication with peers, they are prayers, formulas, and histories that link them to the Emperor's knowledge and the long-vanished architects of Terra. Knowledge becomes both burden and shield. Every fact learned, every sequence mastered, carves a notch in their consciousness, replacing the child they were with a creature of precision and awareness. Memory of home, of parents, of laughter and fear, fades into abstraction until it is as though they have never existed at all. Isolation is constant. Aspirants are rarely allowed to gather except under the watchful gaze of instructors whose presence feels like judgment made flesh. Sleep cycles are staggered, so that the group never shares rest, never experiences comfort in unity. Hunger and thirst are instruments of focus, metered to sharpen the body without extinguishing it. The young warriors learn to endure, not only physically but psychologically, until the very concept of pain becomes a tool to be wielded rather than a hazard to be feared. And yet, even amidst this relentless shaping, there is awe. The palace is a place alive with power. Vaults stretch beyond comprehension, their stone surfaces inscribed with prayers older than most human civilizations. Machines pulse with light and heat, vestiges of the Mechanicus' ancient art. Occasionally, aspirants glimpse figures moving in corridors above, golden forms that seem both human and divine. These are the instructors, the custodians proper, whose every glance feels like a measure of worth. It is said they move faster than thought, strike with inevitability, and see the very sinews of a man's soul. For the aspirants, each encounter is both inspiration and warning, perfection is required, and mercy does not exist here. Rumors whisper through the ranks, carried in half-forgotten memories of the halls. Some say the Emperor himself observes the aspirants through unseen eyes, judging their progress even when no mortal watches. Others claim that fragments of him, or perhaps angels fashioned from his will, occasionally walk among the children, testing not only skill but the capacity to endure terror without faltering. None of these stories are confirmed. None need be. The first oath does not rely on belief, it relies on transformation. The first oath is sealed in the blood, in the silence, and in the marrow of each aspirant. When it is complete, they are no longer simply children of Terra. They are vessels of vigilance, tempered and sharpened, capable of movements, thought, and judgment that no mortal could sustain. Yet even in this moment of grim transcendence, they are still only at the threshold. What they have endured is foundational, a preparation for the centuries of the watch, the trials of the blooded mantle, and the shadows that lie beyond. And in the quiet hours, as the palace hums with its endless activity, they kneel alone, knowing they belong not to themselves but to something greater, something eternal. Their identity is gone. Their past is gone. Only the oath remains, etched into every thought, every heartbeat, every fiber of muscle. The palace waits. The watch calls. The final phase of the first oath is less about instruction than immersion. The aspirants are no longer merely shaped, they are enveloped by the palace itself, its walls, its air, its silence becoming part of them. They move through corridors where no torch burns, where the only light comes from mechanisms older than entire civilizations. Every footstep echoes not against stone, but against centuries of history. To walk here is to feel the weight of the Imperium pressing upon the flesh, the bones, the very blood. The instructors, now distant shadows themselves, watch with an intensity that cannot be measured. They do not correct errors with words, nor offer praise. Their judgment is subtler, insidious, and absolute. A missed step, a momentary lapse in focus, even a thought that drifts toward self-interest is noticed, catalogued, and corrected. Often, correction is not spoken, it is endured. The aspirant is subjected to exercises so taxing that the line between life and obliteration blurs. To endure is not merely obedience, it is survival, the faintest glimmer of which is only enough to carry on. And yet, even amidst this relentless crucible, flashes of purpose pierce the darkness. When aspirants strike in perfect unison, when they move as one body through impossible drills, a brief clarity fills them, a hint of what it will mean to carry the Emperor's will. These moments are fleeting, like lightning in a storm, but they leave a memory more enduring than pain. In these fleeting seconds, they taste what lies beyond the oath, the unity, the inevitability, the perfect execution that marks the Custodian. It is a glimpse of transcendence, and it burns into the marrow. Sleep and dreams are no respite. Even in unconsciousness, the palace reaches into them, shaping their visions, whispering lessons in shadowed tongues. Some dream of golden halls stretching infinitely, of flames that illuminate nothing, of voices calling names long forgotten. Others see darkness pressing in, faceless threats clawing at the edges of reality itself. The aspirants awaken not comforted, but sharpened. The oath penetrates deeper than muscle and bone, it reaches the mind, the spirit, and leaves nothing untouched. When the first oath is finally complete, the aspirants are summoned to the great halls of the palace for the first time as near custodians. Their armor gleams, their movements are precise, and their silence is absolute. They kneel before a chamber where golden light, unnaturally bright and yet impossibly soft, pours from mechanisms hidden deep within the stone. From across the hall, the custodians proper approach, their armor blinding in its perfection, their presence weighing more than any physical burden. A single spear is driven into the floor. The sound is not a strike, but a command, a judgment, a proclamation of worth. The aspirants press their foreheads to the polished stone, and in that gesture, centuries of training, suffering, and transformation converge. The first oath has stripped them bare, hollowed them of self, and in return, it has given them form, purpose, and the faintest echo of immortality. And yet, as they rise, they understand that this is only the beginning. The first oath has destroyed the past, leaving only the seed of what they must become. The watch will demand more, the blooded mantle will demand blood, the veil of shadows will demand silence beyond comprehension, and the throne will demand the last fragments of self. They are prepared, and yet they are not ready. Prepared, because the oath has unmade them. Not ready, because the path stretches endlessly before them, a corridor of stone, shadow, and inevitability. The first oath has ended. But the Emperor's design continues. And the watch awaits. The palace of Terra is not merely stone. It is a living labyrinth, stretching beyond the sight of mortals, its corridors twisting like the threads of a thought too vast to grasp. Within this endless expanse, the newly sworn custodians step into the next stage of their service, the watch. Here, there is no clamor of war, no roar of engines, no celebration of victory. There is only time, thick and unyielding, and the patient gaze of the Emperor. The watch is a crucible of stillness. For centuries, sometimes for millennia, a custodian stands sentinel in halls where light is faint, where dust settles like memory, where the air itself hums with ancient power. Doors with runes older than most civilizations guard secrets never explained. To stand before them is to confront infinity, to feel the weight of what is unseen and unknowable. The aspirants, once children, once warriors in training, are now figures of gold, their bodies honed, their minds sharpened, yet still raw in their endurance. The watch will test them further, stripping away the final remnants of comfort, of self, leaving only vigilance. In these halls, time ceases to flow in the way mortals understand. Days blur into nights, months into years, yet the custodian remains, unbowed and unbroken. Their senses are honed to a terrifying precision. The faintest shiver of air, the softest echo of distant machinery, the shift of shadow across stone, they perceive all, and yet they remain still. There is a rhythm to the silence, a cadence only they can feel, as if the palace itself were breathing beneath their feet. They are statues, yet they are alive. They are living silence. Hunger and thirst are carefully metered, sleep reduced to intervals measured in fractions of necessity rather than comfort. Pain is neither cruel nor indulgent, it is instruction. Those who cannot endure the monotony, who falter in the endless repetition of stillness, are quietly removed. Their names are erased, their absence barely noticed beyond the stone walls. To fail here is not dramatic. It is nothing. The palace tolerates no weakness. To endure, therefore, is the first triumph. To endure perfectly is to approach the divine. Yet even the silent halls are not always safe. Shadows move where none should be, whispers curl from corners that should hold only stone, and occasionally, a faint light flickers across a corridor, unclaimed by any machine. Some whisper that demons test the walls, probing for weakness, while others claim remnants of the Horus heresy linger in hidden vaults, memories of treachery made flesh. The custodians are not told what to expect. They are told only to endure, to watch, to remain immovable. When an intruder manifests, the custodian acts with inevitability. Strike and return to stillness. No hesitation, no question, no thought of self. It is within the watch that the aspirants first sense the immensity of the Emperor's presence. Not in voices, not in visions, not in miracles easily described. Instead, it is a weight pressing upon them, subtle yet undeniable, as if eternity itself is observing. They cannot see him, cannot hear him, and yet they feel his gaze in every motion, in every heartbeat. Sometimes, when the halls are particularly still, they believe the stone itself shivers with approval, or warning. The distinction between the two is irrelevant. They have been remade to serve, not to understand. The watch is a slow erosion of the self. Memory, once fragile, dissolves further under the weight of endless vigil. Childhood, friendship, laughter, pain, all are recast as echoes, muffled beneath the discipline of service. The custodian becomes a vessel of endurance, a sentinel whose will is absolute. Yet paradoxically, in this hollowing, clarity grows. The noise of mortal life, of doubt, of desire, falls away. In its place rises a singular focus, to exist, to observe, to protect. This is the first taste of eternity, and it is intoxicating in its terror. The watch is not a step into battle, yet it is a war in itself. A war against weakness, against time, against the impermanence of flesh and mind. Some do not survive it. Those who do become more than warriors. They become statues of inevitability, golden pillars of vigilance whose presence alone carries the weight of the Emperor's command. Yet even this is only the beginning. Beyond the silent halls awaits the blooded mantle, where stillness must transform into action, and the custodian will learn that patience and wrath are but two sides of the same coin. And so, the watch continues, endless as the stone corridors themselves, shaping the aspirants into instruments of perfection, preparing them for the trials that will demand not only their skill, but their very essence. The watch has begun. The blooded mantle waits. Time in the watch is measured not in days or years, but in the subtle cadence of breathing, in the faint resonance of stone and machinery. The custodians in training learn to feel the pulse of the palace as though it were their own. Every vibration through the floor, every hum of ancient engines, every whisper of ventilation air becomes a signal, a language, a liturgy of vigilance. They move through corridors lined with gilded tracery, where the walls themselves seem to watch, alive with the echoes of centuries. Here, the custodian begins to understand that their existence is not mere duty, it is proof that the Emperor's will endures. Hunger, thirst, and exhaustion are carefully orchestrated. Meals are sparing, rest is brief, and yet the body, honed to its pinnacle, endures. Muscles learn to hold tension indefinitely, reflexes become instantaneous, the eyes sharpen until shadow itself has shape. Pain becomes a teacher. Bruises, blisters, cuts, they are not marks of suffering, but glyphs of progress, inscriptions upon the vessel being perfected. The mind, meanwhile, is disciplined to a razor edge, trained to perceive the imperceptible, to act before thought itself has formed. The aspirants who survive this phase begin to comprehend the magnitude of what is expected. Immortality of service requires mastery not just of flesh, but of thought. Isolation weighs heavily upon them. Though they are never truly alone, the steps of other sentinels echo, distant and measured, the lack of human warmth is profound. They do not speak. They do not laugh. They do not dream as mortals do. And yet, from this deprivation arises a new awareness, a sharpened perception that borders on preternatural. A custodian senses the slight drag of a shadow, the almost imperceptible shiver of a door latch, the faintest disruption in the palace's air. These are not mere skills, they are the transformation of perception itself, the evolution of a warrior into a sentinel whose awareness stretches beyond human limits. It is during these years of patient observation that the aspirants witness the custodians proper in their full, terrifying grace. Golden giants move through the halls with a weightless purpose, their every gesture both ritual and command. They speak rarely, if ever, and when they do, their words are as precise as a blade. Aspirants are expected to emulate this perfection, to internalize it until they themselves are a shadow of inevitability. Yet even at this stage, there is awe, tinged with fear, for the aspirants understand that the line between guidance and judgment is thin, and that even the slightest lapse could mark the end of one's path. Some aspirants falter. Minds fray in the ceaseless monotony. Silence, once a teacher, becomes a tormentor. There are those who mutter to themselves in corridors too dim to be comfortable, whose eyes glaze over as they confront shadows that may not exist. Others collapse in the middle of their posts, their bodies failing where their will had not. Such failures are quietly removed, their absence noted only by the echo of footsteps in the endless halls. The palace does not mourn. The emperor does not intervene. To endure is to live, to falter is to vanish. Yet through it all, a pattern emerges. Those who survive, who endure, begin to feel the presence of something vast pressing upon them, something beyond instruction, beyond observation. It is not sight, not voice, not touch. It is awareness itself, subtle, like the vibration of stone beneath the floor. Some whisper, in moments so private they scarcely acknowledge it even to themselves, that it is the emperor himself, watching, weighing, approving. Others believe it is the palace, alive in a way that mortals cannot comprehend. Whatever it is, it serves to reinforce the truth: the custodian exists not for self, but for eternity, for service, for the defense of the throne. Even as the watch teaches endurance, it also teaches inevitability. The aspirants learn that a custodian's presence alone is deterrent, that perfection itself inspires obedience and fear alike. Every action, no matter how small, is deliberate. Every step through the halls is both patrol and prayer. And as centuries pass, the sentinels come to recognize the subtle rhythms of Terra itself, the pulse of the palace, and the eternal vigilance required to preserve the Imperium. The watch is a trial of patience, of observation, and of quiet strength. Yet it is also preparation. For beyond endless stillness lies the blooded mantle, where patience must give way to action, and the custodian must carry not only the weight of vigilance but the burden of blood. The stillness persists, but the first tremors of battle are approaching. As the centuries stretch on, the watch becomes not only a trial but a transformation. The custodian learns that vigilance is a living thing, a pulse that cannot falter, a flame that cannot dim. Every corridor, every chamber, every vault in the palace teaches a new lesson in patience and precision. The aspirants who once counted hours now count moments, each one laden with significance invisible to mortal eyes. A shadow cast by a torch may mean nothing, or it may presage the intrusion of heresy, the approach of a spy, the presence of a threat that could unravel centuries of order. The custodian's life becomes a calculus of inevitability. Silence is both companion and master. In the deepest halls of the palace, where machinery hums like the heartbeat of an ancient god, the custodians exist as statues of gold, yet each movement is calculated with infinite care. To tilt a head, to shift a weight, even the slight inhale of breath is observed and refined until it becomes part of the pattern, part of the perfection demanded by the emperor. Conversation is unnecessary, thought is measured, precise, and utterly subordinate to the eternal vigilance that defines the watch. The custodian is no longer a man but a node in a living lattice of security and purpose. And yet, in the endless stillness, there are lessons in subtlety as sharp as any blade. The custodian begins to perceive threats before they exist, to sense not only intrusion but intent. They can feel the tremor of fear in a guardsman's step, detect the tremor of guilt in a high-ranking administrator, know that something vital is hidden behind a priest's carefully composed litany. These are not supernatural gifts, but the result of centuries of observation, of muscles and senses and minds honed to a precision mortals cannot conceive. To endure the watch is to learn inevitability itself, to understand that a single presence, perfectly executed, is often more powerful than any army. There are moments when the custodians glimpse the impossibility of their own endurance. Time stretches infinitely. Centuries pass as if in days. Generations of mortals are born and die while the sentinel remains unchanged. The palace itself seems eternal, yet each hall bears witness to decay, to the failures of man, to the fragility of even the greatest civilizations. And the custodian, unmoving, observes all. It is a perspective beyond comprehension, yet it is their fate, their function, and their burden. Yet even in the monotony, in the seeming eternity of the watch, there are glimpses of purpose beyond mere survival. When an intruder appears, a cultist in a hidden corridor, a heretic schemer in the courts of Terra, a subtle threat masked by nobility or faith, the custodian acts with an immediacy that is terrifying. In a heartbeat, they become predator and executioner, their movements both inevitable and precise. Strike, correct, return to stillness. No mortal could understand the suddenness of it, nor the perfection. The watch is not idle, it is preparation for judgment, and the custodian is the instrument of that verdict. And so centuries pass, the custodians in their golden armor becoming both myth and reality. Guardsmen whisper in awe, administrators tremble at unseen scrutiny, priests murmur litanies against enemies only the custodians perceive. In all of Terra, in all of the palace, there is no greater deterrent than their presence. They are inevitability made flesh. And yet, even as they perfect stillness, they feel the whisper of what is to come, the blooded mantle, where patience must yield to action, where the serenity of observation will be replaced by the violence of necessity. The watch is eternal. The custodian endures. But the first strike of inevitability waits beyond silence, ready to transform vigilance into wrath. The stillness of the watch, as absolute as it seemed, was only a prelude. Beyond the golden halls and silent corridors lay the blooded mantle, the level of service where patience yields to fury, where observation transforms into decisive action. The custodian, trained for centuries in the rhythm of vigilance, now steps into a world where every strike carries weight, where every motion is a declaration, and where blood is not a stain but a tool of necessity. Here, perfection is tested not in quiet reflection, but in the crucible of war itself. The first engagements are ritual as much as battle. The custodian faces foes designed to test every muscle, every thought, every fragment of instinct honed during the watch. War machines older than planets may lumber across the floor, carrying weapons that rend stone as if it were parchment. Shadows move with intelligence, hinting at enemies that cannot be seen by mortal eyes alone. And the custodian moves as if he is part of the inevitability of fate itself. Each thrust of spear, each swing of blade, each coordinated strike with a brother in gold is measured to perfection. There is no hesitation. There is no doubt. There is only action made absolute. The blooded mantle demands more than skill. It demands the sacrifice of restraint, the acceptance that killing is not triumph but duty. Every foe vanquished is a necessity, every victory a preservation of the Imperium's fragile order. The custodian carries the burden of conscience even as he delivers justice with unerring precision. There is no glory in this service, there is only the weight of knowing that hesitation could cost billions of lives, that even the smallest lapse could allow heresy to spread like a plague. The rituals of the Blooded Mantle are as precise as those of the Watch, yet they differ in intensity. Sparring and drills are no longer exercises of form but rehearsals of lethality. Each movement is designed to teach efficiency, decisiveness, and the seamless integration of body and weapon. A misstep could mean failure, but failure is rarely met with mercy. It is met with consequence, repetition, correction, and the relentless drive toward perfection. Pain remains a teacher, but now it is paired with the thrill of motion, the understanding that stillness alone is insufficient to safeguard the Imperium. The Custodian learns to read battlefields as others read scripture. The approach of enemies, the sway of flagella, the scent of promethium in the air, the faint shimmer of a warp-tainted presence, all are absorbed instinctively. Their senses, sharpened by centuries of the Watch, now guide their strikes with terrifying precision. Every move, every breath, every blink is coordinated to serve one immutable principle, the protection of the throne and the will of the Emperor. Yet even in war, the Custodian is not merely a soldier. He is an instrument of inevitability, a living embodiment of the Emperor's judgment. Mortals may flinch, may despair, may falter, but the Custodian does not. He moves as though the very universe bends to his purpose. And in that movement lies a paradox: though he is the executor of violence, he is also its restraint. The Blooded Mantle is a lesson in controlled fury, in precise judgment, in the kind of killing that leaves no chaos behind. Battles come in many forms. Sometimes, they are small skirmishes in the palace corridors, where heretical priests seek to undermine order. Sometimes, they are vast engagements across war-torn worlds, where orcs, chaos cults, or traitorous regiments threaten to undo centuries of careful vigilance. In each case, the Custodian adapts instantly. There is no hesitation. There is no debate. There is only the execution of the plan, shaped in mind and body through decades, even centuries, of preparation. And yet, even in the midst of battle, there is beauty. The perfect strike, the synchronization of brother in gold beside brother in gold, the dance of death executed with unerring precision, these moments feel almost holy, a glimpse of divine order imposed upon chaos. The Custodian understands that this is not personal valor, it is service, the embodiment of the Emperor's will in motion. The Blooded Mantle is both trial and affirmation, a forging that burns away hesitation, doubt, and fear, leaving only perfect function behind. And as the battles end, as the corpses of enemies are swept away and the halls are cleansed, the Custodian returns to the quiet moments between engagements. He reflects not on triumph, not on glory, but on preparation. The Blooded Mantle is not an end. It is a refinement, a sharpening for even greater trials. Beyond blood and battle waits the veil of shadows, where silence and secrecy will demand an even deeper surrender of self. The spear is cleaned, the armor polished, the soul tempered. The Custodian stands ready. The veil watches. The Custodian's life in the Blooded Mantle is defined by rhythm, yet that rhythm is never predictable. Each engagement is a test, not only of strength and skill but of judgment, of the ability to discern necessity from desire. The Golden Warrior moves as a single thought, body and mind fused into an instrument of inevitability. He does not fight for vengeance, nor for honor, nor for recognition. He fights because the Imperium must endure. The lesson is harsh but absolute: inaction is failure, and action without precision is worse than inaction. Battles unfold like intricate dances, choreographed not for spectacle but for survival. Orcs crash against walls of oromite, their green blood steaming on cold stone, while traitors lurk in shadowed corridors, waiting for opportunity. The Custodian reads the battlefield in ways no mortal could comprehend: the flicker of a warp-tainted aura, the subtle shift of an enemy's weight, the rhythm of air currents disturbed by hidden machinery. Each observation is absorbed and acted upon instantly. His spear strikes before thought, his shield intercepts before expectation, and the tide of battle bends inexorably to his presence. Yet the Blooded Mantle is not only about raw violence. It is about control, about understanding the consequences of each action. A custodian may strike down dozens of foes with a single motion, but his intent is surgical, his purpose precise. Collateral destruction is avoided where possible, because every ruin, every death, every miscalculation ripples outward, threatening the fragile balance of the Imperium. Killing is a tool, not a thrill, and it is wielded with discipline learned over centuries. The aspirants who endure this lesson begin to grasp the difference between bloodshed as necessity and bloodshed as indulgence. The training is relentless. Even after a battle has concluded, custodians do not rest in the way mortals might. They rehearse maneuvers, refine strikes, analyze outcomes. Simulations are as brutal as reality. Shadows of enemies, mechanized and ghostly, are confronted again and again until each movement is etched into reflex. Failures are never punished with words, only with repetition, with the exacting discipline that transforms instinct into inevitability. There is no pride in success, no shame in failure, only the unending pursuit of perfection. And yet, in this endless sharpening, the custodian begins to perceive the weight of his role in the broader cosmos. He sees the Imperium not as a collection of worlds and institutions, but as a fragile organism, balanced on knife edges of loyalty, faith, and fear. One misjudgment, one hesitation, could allow corruption to spread, could weaken a regiment, could unravel a planet's defenses. The blooded mantle teaches that the custodian is more than a warrior, he is a safeguard, a stabilizer, a living bulwark against entropy. Every strike is both defense and warning, every movement a message. The Emperor's will is inescapable. Some custodians, despite their centuries of endurance, are tested beyond imagination. Warp-tainted entities slip into corridors, their forms shifting with impossible geometry, their minds clawing at the fragile order of reality itself. Chaos cults unleash war machines centuries ahead of design, their engines of destruction humming with forbidden energy. And yet the custodian meets these threats not with panic, not with hesitation, but with the absolute certainty of purpose that defines his order. To falter is impossible. To survive, inevitable. And through such trials, the blooded mantle continues to temper him, fusing patience, precision, and fury into a singular instrument of the Emperor's will. Even in the quiet moments, after the echoes of battle fade, the custodian feels the weight of eternity. The blooded mantle is both a physical and spiritual refinement, a process that burns away fear, doubt, and the faint remnants of mortality. And yet, paradoxically, it also teaches awe. The custodian learns to see the scale of the Imperium, the vastness of Terra, the silent vigilance required to maintain it. This understanding, acquired through blood and discipline, prepares him for the shadow trials to come, the veil of shadows, where knowledge and secrecy will test the limits of endurance even further. The blood is shed. The armor is polished. The spear rests. And the shadows stir. The final stage of the blooded mantle is a crucible of inevitability. The custodian no longer trains to act, he trains to embody action itself. Each battle is a lesson, each strike a sermon. His mind moves as swiftly as his spear, calculating trajectories, predicting enemy movement, and anticipating the consequences of every possible outcome. The violence he wields is not chaos, but order made manifest, a controlled symphony of destruction designed to preserve the fragile equilibrium of the Imperium. In these trials, he begins to understand the weight of his lineage, the significance of the golden armor that once seemed a trophy but now feels like a second skin, a shell of inevitability. Every dent, every scratch is a story, a testament to survival and judgment executed without hesitation. He sees the ghosts of those who failed before him, not as spirits, but as lessons carved into the stones of the palace, etched in the silence between corridors, whispered in the hum of engines, and in the faint echo of steel against stone. Their absence is a constant reminder, perfection is not optional, and mercy is a luxury the custodian cannot afford. The blooded mantle teaches the subtlety of restraint within action. The custodian may stand against hundreds of foes, yet he strikes only where necessary, parrying the inevitable while ensuring that collateral destruction is minimized. Every motion is deliberate, every decision weighed against centuries of doctrine and instinct. To the untrained eye, his actions appear effortless, almost divine, but the truth is hidden. Each strike is the culmination of millennia of preparation, every movement guided by a lifetime of training, every heartbeat synchronized with the rhythm of inevitability. Amidst the carnage and precision, the custodian begins to feel the first whispers of what lies beyond, the veil of shadows. It is a realm not of open conflict, but of secrets, conspiracies, and truths too vast and dangerous for mortal comprehension. The blooded mantle does not prepare him for strength alone, it prepares him for judgment, for discernment, for the delicate task of acting unseen yet shaping outcomes. Every strike now carries a dual weight, the immediate act and the unseen consequences that ripple through the Imperium. Action and foresight become inseparable. There is also revelation in this final stage. The custodian glimpses the scale of his purpose, not merely to preserve life, but to shape it. He is the blade that keeps heresy at bay, the shield that protects the innocent, and the silent hand that ensures the Emperor's will is enforced across time and space. Even in victory, he feels no triumph, for victory is not a reward but a responsibility, a reminder that his service is perpetual, unending, and without personal claim. And still, the Golden Warrior endures. He rises from the blood-stained halls, his armor gleaming in torchlight, his spear steady, his senses alert. Though the battles have tested him in every conceivable way, the trials of the blooded mantle are only a prelude. Beyond lies the veil, a domain of secrecy and shadow, where even the trained eye may fail, where intellect, patience, and perception must surpass every physical skill. The custodian steels himself, knowing that the lessons of blood will guide him, but will not suffice. The spear is sheathed. The echoes of combat fade, yet the lessons remain, etched into muscle, mind, and memory. The custodian has endured the blooded mantle and emerged sharper, faster, more certain, more absolute. Yet a faint shiver of anticipation lingers beneath the golden plate, the palace breathes, the shadows stir, and the veil waits. The blood has been shed. The vigilance continues. The shadows await. The veil of shadows is unlike anything the custodian has known. Beyond the gleaming corridors of the palace, beyond the disciplined chaos of battle, lies a realm of secrets so deep that even the golden warriors feel its gravity. It is not measured by time or distance, but by perception and understanding. Here, the custodian's senses, honed through centuries of the watch and tempered in the blooded mantle, are tested against threats invisible to mortal eyes. It is a level of service where knowledge itself becomes a weapon, where silence conceals power and deception walks unchallenged, yet the custodian must perceive it all. The journey into the veil begins with isolation. The custodian leaves the familiar cadence of drills and combat behind, entering chambers and corridors designed to obscure, to mislead, and to reveal only what is necessary. Shadows are not merely absences of light, they are guides, warnings, and traps. The air is heavy with the faint smell of ozone and machinery, with the subtle scent of incense that masks the presence of intruders and spirits alike. Movement must be precise, thought disciplined, and perception expanded. Every sound, every flicker of motion, every whisper of presence is catalogued and interpreted. A single lapse can compromise entire operations, and here, consequences are measured in lives, secrets, and sometimes entire worlds. Within the veil, the custodian learns patience of an almost unbearable kind. Information arrives in fragments, half-glimpsed in reflection, whispered through loyal servitors, or encoded in data slates with layers of encryption older than most civilizations. The custodian must assemble these fragments, read between the lines, and anticipate dangers that do not announce themselves. A single misstep, a misread gesture, a delayed intuition, a subtle flaw in judgment, can allow heresy to fester, corruption to spread, and the emperor's will to be undermined. This is a domain where patience is not merely virtue, it is survival. Yet the veil of shadows is not merely about vigilance and intelligence. It is a confrontation with ambiguity. Custodians encounter plots layered like concentric circles, each more complex and subtle than the last. Political intrigue, subterfuge among the Adeptus Terra, the silent movements of rogue administratum officials, whispers of chaos-tainted cults, all are entwined, overlapping, and impossible to parse without the full clarity of mind the custodian has cultivated. Here, the Golden Warrior's instincts, trained in battle and sharpened in silent watch, are pressed into service in ways that are less physical but no less lethal. The custodian's armor, once a symbol of visibility and authority, now serves as both shield and camouflage. Movements are precise, silent, yet omnipresent. He must strike only when necessary, influence events without leaving trace, and observe without being observed. Every corridor, every council chamber, every hidden passageway becomes a theater for subtle maneuvering. Victory in the Vale is rarely declared by force of arms, it is declared by knowledge, foresight, and the quiet application of inevitability. Even in this realm, the custodian perceives the hand of the emperor. It is not tangible, not direct, and often exists only as rumor whispered among the aspirants and lesser servants, a fleeting shadow that seems to approve, a moment of intuition that guides a hand, a presence felt rather than seen. Whether it is the throne's reflection, the emperor himself, or the palace's own will, the custodian cannot be certain. And yet, certainty is irrelevant. In the Vale, action must be absolute even in the absence of clarity. The psychological burden here is unlike any physical trial. Hours, sometimes decades, pass as the custodian monitors events, deciphers plots, and prepares to act. Sleep is fragmented, and even in rest, the mind continues to turn over clues, patterns, and threats. Isolation amplifies awareness, but also magnifies doubt, fear, and the temptation to rely on instinct rather than reason. Here, discipline is tested to the utmost, the Golden Warrior must remain unmoved, unbroken, and untainted by the frailties of mortal thought. And yet, even as he walks unseen among the currents of intrigue, there is awe. The custodian begins to understand the scope of the Imperium's fragility, the delicate interweaving of faith, power, and knowledge that sustains the Emperor's dominion. It is a revelation that strikes more deeply than any battlefield, more profoundly than any lesson of combat. The survival of humanity depends not only on steel, but on secrecy, subtlety, and the unerring judgment of those who move beyond perception itself. The Vale waits, patient and eternal, and the custodian steps further into it, ready to act when the moment demands, yet silent, unseen, and inexorably present. The shadows are alive. The throne is watching. The custodian moves through the Vale not as a soldier, but as a force of inevitability. Here, the corridors are not merely stone and metal, they are maps of influence, arteries of power through which information and intent flow unseen. The Golden Warrior reads them as instinctively as he reads the tremor of a spear in battle. Every whisper in a council chamber, every hesitation in a noble's step, every minor inconsistency in the movements of a servitor, all carry meaning. To fail to perceive even one signal is to risk catastrophe, yet to act without full comprehension is equally perilous. In the Vale, patience is weaponized, and knowledge is the sharpest blade. Tasks assigned within the Vale are often unheralded, anonymous, and untraceable. The custodian may shadow an official for weeks, watching their routines, noting irregularities, while the official remains unaware that golden eyes follow every motion. He may intervene subtly, adjusting events through unseen influence, ensuring that the Imperium's machinery continues to function despite the subtle corrosion of ambition, fear, or heresy. Violence is reserved for absolute necessity, most threats are neutralized before a blade need strike. To survive here requires cunning, discipline, and a comprehension of human, and sometimes inhuman, nature far beyond mortal understanding. The Vale also tests perception on a metaphysical level. Some corridors hum with warp-tainted energy, vibrations that whisper promises of power or hints of corruption. Shadows may twist unnaturally, seeming to anticipate motion, and voices echo where none should exist. The custodian learns to distinguish reality from illusion, to interpret the faintest signs without succumbing to false impressions. Failure is subtle but lethal, a misread signal may allow treachery to propagate or a cult to gain a foothold within the palace. Here, knowledge is both shield and weapon, yet it comes at the cost of the soul, as even the Golden Warrior begins to feel the isolation of understanding too vast for mortal minds. Sometimes, the Custodian is tested directly by agents who are equally subtle. Rogue Adeptus Terra officials, members of secretive orders, or shadowed remnants of chaos infiltrators may appear to move in innocuous patterns, yet the trained eyes of the Custodian perceive the danger embedded within. Each intervention must be precise, decisive, and invisible. He cannot hesitate, yet he cannot act prematurely. Success is the preservation of order without trace, the extinguishing of a threat before it ever becomes visible. The weight of centuries of preparation informs every decision, every movement, every breath. Even in victory, the Custodian feels no triumph. The veil is a continuum, an endless cycle of observation, deduction, and intervention. There are no final battles here, no glorious conquests. Instead, there is the slow, imperceptible shaping of reality to align with the Emperor's will. The Golden Warrior becomes both participant and observer, simultaneously shaping outcomes and remaining unseen. It is a paradox of power: he is everywhere yet nowhere, essential yet invisible, feared yet unknown. Rumors persist even within the Custodian's own ranks. Some whisper that fragments of the Emperor's own essence move through the palace, guiding judgment unseen. Others claim that certain veiled tasks are so profound, so perilous, that even the Golden Warriors themselves question whether mortals could ever understand them. None of these rumors are confirmed, and yet they serve to underscore a deeper truth: the veil is not merely a stage of service, it is a crucible for the mind and spirit, a trial beyond flesh, beyond steel, beyond even comprehension itself. And yet, through it all, the Custodian endures. He moves through the palace corridors as inevitability incarnate, his armor glinting faintly in torchlight, his gaze unbroken. Every shadow is a lesson, every whisper a guide, every corridor a test. Through patience, discipline, and centuries of preparation, he has transformed knowledge into a weapon, vigilance into instinct, and secrecy into an extension of his being. The veil is eternal. The Custodian is its executor. And beyond the veil, beyond the endless corridors of secrecy and subtlety, waits the throne's ultimate reflection, the final level, where individuality dissolves and service becomes absolute. The final phase of the veil is a test of both endurance and judgment. Here, the Custodian confronts the subtlety of power in its most dangerous form. Threats do not announce themselves with blaring alarms or the clash of steel, they hide in plain sight, entwined with bureaucracy, faith, and ambition. A misplaced word, an overlooked gesture, a faltering tone, all can ripple through the Imperium with consequences too vast for any mortal to comprehend. The Custodian moves as if he is both the hand and the eye of inevitability, acting not for glory, not for recognition, but because the Emperor's will must be preserved. In these corridors, the Golden Warrior experiences time differently. Days, decades, even centuries pass in cycles of observation and intervention. Sleep is fragmented, meals are minimal, conversation is almost non-existent. Every moment is dedicated to perception and action, each more subtle and refined than any battlefield maneuver. Here, patience is weaponized, knowledge becomes shield and sword alike, and even silence carries meaning. The Custodian learns to anticipate not only actions but intentions, to discern truth through layers of deception, and to act with precision that seems preordained. Some threats are ephemeral, glimpsed only through intuition or fleeting evidence: a veiled cultist whose ritual is incomplete, a corrupted administrator hiding forbidden records, a whisper of warp energy rippling across the palace walls. Other threats are more tangible: saboteurs, traitors, spies, but even these are cloaked in subtlety. Each encounter is a test of timing, judgment, and perception. The Custodian strikes decisively yet discreetly, ensuring that danger is neutralized without revealing the Emperor's hand. Every success is silent, unseen, yet it carries the weight of worlds preserved. The veil also imposes a burden of uncertainty. The Custodian cannot be certain of outcomes until long after his intervention, and sometimes not at all. Rumors of the Emperor's presence in guiding events are pervasive but unverifiable. Perhaps a fragment of his essence whispers through corridors, perhaps the palace itself acts as arbiter, perhaps both. The custodian cannot pause to question, he must act. Certainty is unnecessary. Obedience and clarity of purpose are sufficient. It is this discipline that transforms vigilance into inevitability, perception into judgment, and presence into power. Even as he moves unseen, the custodian feels the enormity of his role. He is a sentinel not merely of stone and blood, but of faith, law, and the fragile fabric of the Imperium itself. The decisions he makes, the actions he takes, ripple silently, shaping outcomes beyond mortal understanding. In this domain, the Golden Warrior becomes almost mythic, a figure feared and revered by those who sense his presence without ever seeing him. To fail is unthinkable, for failure would allow corruption to spread unchecked, an outcome the custodian cannot permit. And yet, there is a paradoxical clarity in the veil. Though he is unseen, unacknowledged, and often isolated, the custodian knows the significance of his actions more profoundly than any soldier in open battle. Every strike, every intervention, every correction ensures the stability of Terra, the survival of the Imperium, and the continued will of the Emperor. The veil is not merely a test, it is a transformation. It melds patience, perception, judgment, and action into a single, unerring instrument of service. As the custodian emerges from the veil, he is tempered in a way no battlefield could achieve. He has endured centuries of silence, observed countless plots, neutralized threats both subtle and overt, and refined the integration of mind, body, and judgment into perfection. The lessons of the Watch, the blooded mantle, and the veil converge into a singular clarity: service to the Emperor is absolute, unending, and all-consuming. The veil has passed. The throne awaits. The throne is the final stage, yet it is less a place than an idea, a culmination of purpose, sacrifice, and inevitability. Centuries of discipline, blood, and vigilance converge in its presence. The custodian approaches not with hope, nor expectation, nor pride, but with the calm certainty of one who has been remade by the Watch, refined by the blooded mantle, and tempered in the veil of shadows. The golden throne radiates an aura of majesty and burden, a presence so vast that even the most disciplined warrior feels the weight of eternity pressing upon his soul. Approach to the throne is ceremonial, yet it carries no pomp in the mortal sense. The custodian walks corridors lined with towering statues of past defenders, their visages frozen in silent command. Each step echoes across vast halls, and every movement is mirrored by centuries of expectation. The air itself seems alive, vibrating with the whispers of servitors, the faint hum of ancient machines, and the unseen gaze of the Emperor. Here, action is measured not in seconds but in the awareness of what has been endured and what must be preserved. Every gesture, every breath, every heartbeat becomes part of the continuum of service. The throne demands awareness beyond perception. It is not enough to act or to observe, one must understand, anticipate, and embody the Emperor's will. Every custodian must recognize that the line between success and failure is invisible, that even the smallest misjudgment can ripple across the Imperium with consequences unfathomable. Their training in the Watch has taught endurance, the blooded mantle has taught precision and action, the veil has taught judgment and subtlety, but the throne teaches perspective. Here, the Golden Warrior sees the sum of the Imperium in its fragility and strength, its devotion and corruption, its miracles and its flaws. Even in stillness, the throne exerts power. Golden light flows from mechanisms hidden within the endless machinery, illuminating corridors in a glow that seems both real and unreal. Servitors tend to endless consoles, adjusting feeds, monitoring signals, and attending to the Emperor's needs with movements so precise they appear preordained. The custodian observes and participates simultaneously. Every step forward, every adjustment of armor or spear, is done in harmony with the throne's eternal rhythm. The custodian becomes not only guardian but participant in the ongoing maintenance of the Imperium itself. The throne's lessons are subtle yet profound. The custodian must reconcile the immensity of his training with the infinitesimal nature of his own will. The Emperor's apotheosis, the function of the Astronomicon, the slow decay and renewal of Terra's defenses, these are matters not fully revealed, understood only in fragments, rumors, and liturgy. The Golden Warrior cannot claim comprehension, only obedience. Every action is shaped by the certainty of duty rather than the clarity of knowledge, every movement by the expectation of service rather than by ambition or curiosity. Observation and action converge. The Custodian sees the flow of resources across the Imperium, the movements of fleets and armies, the subtle decay of heresy in isolated worlds. He intervenes when necessary, striking unseen where the Emperor's hand cannot be directly felt. It is a role of almost divine responsibility, invisible, omnipresent, absolute. And in this presence, the Custodian experiences a paradoxical solitude, a reminder that even perfection carries the weight of loneliness. There is no camaraderie here, no recognition, no mortal reward, only service, eternal and unending. And yet, even in this endless duty, the Custodian feels awe. The throne is more than a machine, more than a chair, more than a vessel. It is a nexus of purpose, a focal point of millennia of human achievement, devotion, and sacrifice. It is a presence that demands surrender of self, and in that surrender, grants clarity. Every movement, every thought, every instinct of the Custodian is aligned with a singular truth: the Imperium endures, and the Emperor's will is executed without hesitation. The Golden Warrior kneels, not in prayer, not in supplication, but in acknowledgement of the enormity of service completed and the infinite service yet required. The throne is eternal, the Custodian's vigilance absolute, and the Imperium continues, balanced on the edge of inevitability and perfection. The throne awaits. The Custodian remains. In the halls surrounding the throne, the Custodian moves with deliberate precision, every gesture measured against centuries of training and millennia of precedent. Here, there is no distraction, no uncertainty, and no indulgence. The Emperor's machinery hums with quiet authority, data slates flicker with endless streams of information, and servitors perform tasks whose significance is unfathomable to mortal comprehension. Each Custodian understands, without question, that their presence is both shield and sanction, a living guarantee that the Emperor's will be enforced even in the shadows of ignorance. The lessons of the Watch, the blooded mantle, and the veil converge in the throne's sphere. Observation becomes action, action becomes judgment, and judgment itself is informed by a perception that transcends the human scale. A subtle shift in an administrator's tone, a slight imbalance in a planetary defense grid, a whisper of warp taint hidden in ritual data, all are noted and corrected with inexorable precision. The Custodian's actions are invisible, yet absolute. There is no room for hesitation, for doubt, or for error. To falter in this sacred domain is unthinkable, to succeed is to preserve the Imperium, often without recognition, and always without end. Even the passage of time seems different here. Days and nights, centuries and millennia, these labels hold no meaning. The Custodian perceives change as a stream of potentialities, a flow of consequences cascading from the faintest actions. The throne is a nexus, and every decision, every subtle intervention, ripples outward across the galaxy. The Golden Warrior acts as a fulcrum, translating infinitesimal observation into decisive correction. Each movement is a microcosm of inevitability, every decision a brushstroke in the vast tableau of the Imperium's survival. The throne's presence is both weight and guide. It is neither benevolent nor cruel, it is absolute. Golden light pulses faintly from the ancient mechanisms, illuminating the Custodian in ways that are more spiritual than physical. It is a reminder of the magnitude of the duty he has undertaken. The Emperor is both distant and omnipresent, a force whose will manifests through the Custodian's own actions. Rumors and liturgies suggest that fragments of the Emperor's essence may move among the palace, guiding judgment, whispering insight, and weighing the purity of service. Whether this is truth, prayer, or perception, the Custodian acts as if it is certain, and in doing so, he aligns himself with the Emperor's design. There is no respite here. Even when the Golden Warrior kneels, seemingly at rest, every fiber of his being remains vigilant. The throne cannot be protected by fatigue or negligence. Systems must be maintained, plots observed, enemies preempted, and whispers of heresy eradicated before they take root. This eternal watch is a trial of endurance, not strength, a test of awareness, not force. The custodian endures, as he always has, shaped by millennia of service and honed to a singular clarity of purpose. And yet, the throne is more than duty, it is revelation. Within its presence, the custodian glimpses the interwoven threads of the Imperium, the delicate balances of power, the infinitesimal motions of faith, politics, and war. He perceives how each intervention, no matter how subtle, preserves or undermines the vast lattice of human civilization. The scale is almost impossible to comprehend, yet he acts with certainty because his training has fused mind, body, and judgment into an instrument capable of bearing the weight of eternity. Even the golden armor, shining and flawless, feels less like protection and more like a vessel of purpose. Each dent, each glint, each reflection of light serves as a reminder that the custodian is no longer mortal. He is guardian, executor, observer, and instrument. His individuality has merged with his duty, his existence is defined by service, and his actions ripple across the Imperium like silent, unbroken currents. The throne does not forgive, nor reward, nor pity, it simply exists, and through its presence, the custodian exists as well. The golden warrior kneels once more, not in reverence, but in understanding. He has endured the watch, the blooded mantle, and the veil. He has perfected motion, judgment, and perception. He has become the embodiment of inevitability, a sentinel whose presence alone shapes the course of empires. And yet, he knows that this is not the end. The throne is eternal. The custodian's vigilance is perpetual. Service, in its purest form, never concludes. The throne is eternal. The custodian is eternal. The Imperium endures. The final moments before true communion with the throne are quiet, almost imperceptible. The custodian stands alone in a chamber where time feels suspended, where the hum of machinery resonates like the heartbeat of the universe itself. Here, there is no urgency, no battle, no whisper of intrigue, only the vast, unbroken presence of the Emperor, the golden light of the throne bathing the sentinel in a glow both harsh and holy. The air vibrates with expectation, not of mortal anticipation, but of inevitability. Every movement, every breath, every thought feels magnified, stretched across centuries of duty, across the eternity of service. He kneels, not in supplication, but in alignment. The lessons of the watch, the blooded mantle, and the veil coalesce into a singular truth: the custodian is no longer merely a warrior, a sentinel, or an observer. He is an extension of the Emperor's will, a living instrument whose every action safeguards countless worlds. The golden armor, polished and scarred by time, is not decoration but testament, a vessel containing centuries of sacrifice and discipline. The spear he bears feels less like a weapon and more like a conduit, channeling purpose, judgment, and inevitability with every careful tilt of his stance. In this presence, he perceives the weight of the Imperium as never before. Entire worlds, entire sectors, entire legions of men and machines, all interconnected, all fragile, all dependent upon unseen vigilance. The custodian understands that his role is not to lead, not to command, but to sustain, to act as the unyielding fulcrum upon which the balance of humanity rests. To falter would be unthinkable. To succeed is necessary, yet acknowledgement is neither sought nor expected. Service itself is the only reward, and the throne watches silently, yet palpably, as the golden warrior assumes his eternal duty. The chamber itself seems alive, responding subtly to his presence. Lights flicker in measured sequences, servitors move with an almost anticipatory precision, and the faint vibrations of the throne's machinery reverberate through the floor, through the armor, through the very marrow of his being. These are not signs of divinity in the mortal sense, but of absolute order, of a system so vast and meticulous that it can only function through centuries of discipline and unwavering fidelity. The custodian becomes one with this rhythm, each motion a reflection of inevitability, each heartbeat a reinforcement of eternal service. Even as he kneels, he senses threats, whispers, and potentialities that are invisible to mortal eyes. The veil of shadows may have been a trial in subtlety, but the throne's sphere demands both perception and action on a scale incomprehensible. Decisions must be made instantly, sometimes in thought alone, yet their effects ripple outward across the Imperium. A misplaced word, a delayed movement, or a misjudged glance could allow heresy to fester, corruption to spread, or worlds to fall. The Custodian's mind, refined by millennia, processes all possibilities with calm certainty. In this space, hesitation is death, and decisiveness is salvation. And yet, there is a quiet reverence, a recognition that the path he has walked, through silence, through blood, through shadow, has led to this convergence of purpose. He has endured, learned, acted, and observed. He has been remade in gold and will, perfected through trials unimaginable to mortal men. Every challenge, every battle, every secret has refined him into a singular instrument of the Emperor's will. There is clarity here, but it is not triumph. There is understanding, but it is not comfort. There is eternity, and it is unyielding. As he rises to stand before the throne, the Custodian feels the culmination of service, the apex of duty, and the weight of infinite responsibility. Every breath is measured, every motion deliberate, every thought aligned with purpose. The throne is eternal. The Custodian is eternal. And through him, through his vigilance, the Imperium endures, unbroken, unyielding, and shielded by a presence that is at once mortal and divine. The golden warrior straightens, spear poised, armor gleaming in perfect light. He does not speak, does not question, does not hesitate. Eternity stretches before him, a battlefield of infinite consequence, yet he remains unmoved. He is the Custodian. He is inevitability. He is the eternal watch upon the throne. And so, the Imperium endures. The throne is eternal. The Custodian remains.